I wish the new board all the very best in our chapter's new adventures. So as always, I have reserved the biggest of thank yous of all to our current board members for their companionship on my own leadership journey, for their work for the chapter, and finally for their work for tonight. So it gives me great honor and pleasure that I am joined tonight by Lena, our current Vice President, Franda, who you've already met, and our MC and Director of Community, and Anita, our Director of Marketing. Unfortunately, Barbara, Director of Finance and Admin, is unable to join. Now, the exciting part. As I hand you back to Franda to move on with the program, have your favorite beverage to hand, and I hope you enjoy the night.
Absolutely wonderful, Rania. Thank you so much. And thank you for the service that you've given, not only as president, but even the years before. We all appreciate you, and we appreciate this journey. So now we're going to move it over to Lena, our current Vice President, soon to be President. I am so excited about this journey. I really am. I just know that together we are just going to continue Rania's legacy and then create our own at the same time. So Lena, over to you.
Thank you, Franda. Thank you, Rania. And thank you all, mostly our members, because without you, this chapter does not exist. So looking forward to writing the continuation of what we started, and even growing higher and bigger with you, Franda, Anita, Barbara, the new executives, and definitely our members. I will not have a speech because we're really waiting for the exciting part of Carrie and Joel here. And I will immediately introduce our speakers. So we have with us both Carrie and Joel, who we thank so much for having accepted to support our chapter so that you hear it from the source, all the questions you had about credentialing, the new credentialing and the new competencies and the CKA. As mentioned, please do post your questions in the chat box, and we will take some time at the end for Carrie and Joel to answer them. So let me quickly introduce to you Carrie Abner, the Global Vice President of ICF Credential and Standard. Carrie is an experienced association executive who has advanced professional associations at the local, state, national, and international levels, with a passion for bringing together diverse communities of practitioners through common purpose and voice. Abner has more than 2 decades of experience in communications, domestic and foreign policy, and nonprofit management in her roles at the International Coaching Federation, the Council of State Governments, and the International Council for Voluntary Action Interaction. She currently serves as Vice President of ICF Credentials and Standard, where she works to strengthen and grow the certification of coach practitioners around the world and ensure the highest standard for professional and ethical practice in coaching. Carrie holds a master's degree in international affairs from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And we also have with us Joel DiGirolamo. Apologies, Joel. Joel is the Director of Coaching Science for the International Coaching Federation, ICF, where he leads the organization's efforts to develop, curate, and disseminate information on the science of coaching. Joel has published numerous articles, book chapters, and white papers in coaching research. He has more than 30 years of staff and management experience in Fortune 500 companies and is the author of 2 books, Leading Team Alpha and Yoga in No Time at All. Joel holds a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology from Kansas State University and an MBA from Xavier University and a BS in engineering from Purdue University. He's also associate editor for Consulting Psychology Journal. Carrie and Joel, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lena, and congratulations to you and to Franda. To Rania, many thanks for your service to the UAE chapter and chapter board. Anita, thank you as well for your service to the board and to the chapter and to ICF. You know, our relationship with ICF chapters all over the world is such an important partnership, and we so appreciate your service and leadership in your communities to help us spread the word about credentialing and the importance of networking with a global organization like the International Coaching Federation. Thanks for the opportunity to join you today. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides here, and we'll get this started. Okay, hopefully everyone can see those. It is such an honor and privilege to be with you all tonight, and to see the list of individuals who are joining us and where you all come from is so exciting. It's part of the most exciting part of any of these webinars for me, to see where all in the world individuals are joining from, and to be able to have a conversation with so many around the world is truly an honor and privilege. So thank you for the opportunity. So Joel and I are here to talk about the updated core competencies and how we are integrating those updated core competencies into the credentialing program, and including the updated credentialing exam. And so we're going to dive right in here in just a minute. Here's our agenda for our time together today. We're going to talk about the One ICF structure and ICF Credentials and Standards, which is the organization that I have the privilege of serving. We're going to talk about the updated ICF core competencies, how we came to adopt updated core competencies after 20 years of having our core competency framework in place, and how those updated core competencies compare to the original framework. And we're also going to talk about how we are integrating the updated ICF core competencies into the credentialing process. And we're going to save lots of time at the end for questions and answers, because we know that there are lots of questions that come along with it, any change like this. So to get started, I want to talk a little bit about the new One ICF structure, which we launched in January of 2020. Some of you may have seen this graphic before, but I think it gives a really nice visual of how our organization has been reorganized to better and more comprehensively serve the coaching community. You know, in 2020, it was a challenging year. It was a big and significant year in so many ways, and challenging in many ways. But for the International Coaching Federation, it was also a milestone year for us, in that it was our 25th anniversary as the global organization for coaches and for coaching. So one of the things that we did to really acknowledge this important anniversary and celebrate it was we expanded our structure. We went from essentially one organization serving coaches to 7 different organizations designed intentionally to serve the entire coaching profession. So we went from the International Coach Federation to the International Coaching Federation. That may sound like a really small change, just adding ing to one portion of our name, but it's actually a pretty substantial change in the way that we're doing our work, the way that we're approaching so many of the products and services that we provide. It really is a transition in the way that we're serving not only coaches, which is still a fundamental part of our work, but we're also looking at new ways to serve coaching clients, to serving organizations that integrate coaching, to serving communities in the world. And it's all dedicated to our vision, ensuring that coaching is an integral part of a thriving society, and that every ICF coach represents the highest quality of professional coaching. So we're doing this through the work of these 6 unique family organizations, which you might see here on the outer ring of this circle. Some of these organizations are providing services that have always been a really core part of the ICF and what we do. So for instance, the ICF Professional Coaches is our primary membership body for the ICF. It's it's the organization that supports individual members as well as chapters like the UAE chapter here. This continues to be a very integral part of what the ICF does. ICF Credentials and Standards happens to be the organization that I get to be a part of and lead, and it provides another really core service that ICF has been involved with for many years, the credentialing process. So we are continuing to provide credentials to skilled, knowledgeable coach practitioners all around the world. ICF Coach Training, which just last week launched a new name, ICF Coaching Education, is another core part of our organization and has been for many years, providing accreditation for coaching, education, and training programs around the world. And the ICF Foundation is the charitable wing of the ICF that has been around for several years, providing pro bono coaching opportunities and really moving forward social progress, through coaching. In addition to this, we have two new organizations that are brand new elements of our structure. ICF Coaching and Organizations represents for the first time ICF's dedication and commitment to supporting coaching within organizational structures, whether that's private companies or government agencies or nonprofit organizations. This is the organization dedicated to adoption of coaching cultures within organizations. And the ICF Thought Leadership Institute, which is dedicated to looking at the future of coaching. So how is our profession transitioning and evolving with time, and how are we working to ensure that the coaching profession is ready for the changes of the future? All of this comes together through a global enterprise, the ICF Global Enterprise, which is really the core of this circle and the core of our organization, providing coordination and consistency across our entire organizational structure to ensure that we're all focused on the same large vision and mission. So this is really exciting to be a part of that, and I'm really thrilled to be with you all today representing ICF Credentials and Standards. You know, it's really important for the advancement of the coaching profession that we continue to show our commitment to the highest levels of training and education, to competence, and to ethics. As you all well know, coaching is not a formally or centrally regulated profession. But ICF credentials really provide coaches with a way to distinguish themselves as a coaching practitioner who is submitted to a really rigorous training and educational process, to experience in coaching hours, and to independent assessment of their knowledge and skills as a coach. It also distinguishes coaches as someone who is committed to a code of ethics, as all ICF credentialed coaches and members of the ICF do. This provides a really important message to clients of coaching and potential clients, that the individual that they are working with is experienced and qualified to provide coaching services at a high standard and quality level. It allows them to trust that who they are working with is qualified to do that job. And it also demonstrates a commitment to the maintenance of competence as required through the credential renewal process, which is required every 3 years. For clients, even those who may not require their coach to hold a credential, the credentialing process and those credentials demonstrate not just the qualifications, skill, and commitment to high professional and ethical practice on the part of the individual coach, but it also demonstrates the integrity and professionalism of the entire coaching profession. So that's really, really important. So
Carrie?
yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but we've got some people saying if you could move just a little bit the mic away because it's creating some noise. Just move it a little bit.
Thank you. Apologies for that. Thank you. So let's take a little bit of a look at ICF credential holders around the world. Just 2 weeks ago, we announced a very exciting milestone, which is for the first time ever, ICF had achieved 40,000 active credential holders worldwide. So I pulled some numbers this morning, and we are already at 554 active credentialed coaches in 140 countries and territories who hold one of our 3 ICF credentials: the Associate Certified Coach, the Professional Certified Coach, and the Master Certified Coach credentials. You see here the numbers for each of those levels, and like I said, this is hot off the presses. This is as of this morning, so you're getting the most up-to-date numbers. Now, I also pulled some numbers for credentialed coaches within the UAE in particular. I know we have lots of countries and regions represented on this call today, but I did pull the numbers specifically for the UAE. In the UAE, there are 278 ACC credentialed coaches, 135 PCC credentialed coaches, and 12 MCC credentialed coaches, which is really outstanding. So now's our chance. We really want to transition into the core competencies and primarily the process and how we came about the adoption of updated core competencies. And to start, I'd really like to start by talking about what the core competencies really represent. They are the central tenets that unite professional coach practitioners in their work. So these are the common elements that that all credentialed coaches really integrate into their practice, into their work. They were developed to support greater understanding about the skills and approaches used within today's coaching profession as defined by the ICF. And they really represent the common behaviors and skills used by trained professional coaches across the globe and really across any coaching style, regardless of their area of discipline, the context in which they operate and provide coaching, etc. So they really are the uniting factors that bind all coach practitioners around the world. They are the foundation of practice for coaches that unite the coaching profession. And they also serve as the foundation for the ICF credentialing process, as the basis for coaching education, the credentialing written exam known as the Coach Knowledge Assessment, and performance evaluation assessment. So they really are integral to the entire credentialing process. As you all know, in 2019, ICF announced the publication of updated core competencies. This represented the first time in ICF's 25-year history that the competencies had been updated or revised. And we're now in the final stages of the process to integrate those updated core competencies throughout the credentialing process. We're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later in this presentation, but first we want to talk a little bit about how did we get to updated core competencies? What was the process? How did we come about changing and revising the updated core competencies that were published in 2019? And for that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Joel, who's going to walk us through some of the research that served as the basis for these important updates. Joel?
Thank you, Carrie, and it's really great to be here with everybody tonight, this morning. So as we look at the idea of a job analysis, this is a fundamental concept that's used in industrial and organizational psychology. And a job analysis tries to get at the heart of what is a specific job, what does it entail? And so you take the people who are really good at that job, or what we call subject matter experts, or sometimes we call them SMEs, and we ask them, what do you do in your job? And so you will hear, so you gather those people, you may do surveys, you may do interviews, you may get them together for workshops, and we do a combination of these kinds of methods. Now, you may hear, you will hear in this presentation, and you will hear it a lot, the concept of competencies, and you'll also hear the concept of knowledge, skills, and abilities, or in some cases, other characteristics. So a lot of times you'll hear KSAOs for knowledge, skills, and abilities. And these are just two different types of models. and they're basically interchangeable. So the knowledge, skills, and abilities model can be used interchangeably with a competency model or a competency set or concept. And so what anybody who's trying to do a job analysis, trying to understand what happens in a job, is they're looking at the tasks. What tasks are performed for each of those jobs? So in every case, you want to bring your subject matter experts together. You want to get a diversity of viewpoints. And so in our case, we got a diversity from different geographies, different genders, different education levels, different experience levels, although you do want to tend to the higher end because these are the people who have practiced for a long time. And so, as I mentioned, what we do is in our workshops and our surveys, we try to get as broad a diverse group of people as possible. Now, it's a best practice to update your competency model every 5 to 7 years. And the reason for this is new technology can come in that can change a job, how it works, what technology you have to work with in that particular role. Jobs may get split apart, there may be more specialization, or jobs may be combined and brought together. And so it's really a good practice to update every now and then. Our goal is to have a data-driven approach, and we want all of our work to be evidence-driven. And so all of the competencies in the updated model had to have evidence behind them that we saw in all of that work that we did. So as we look at what the activities were that we carried out in this job analysis, we started with a small set of interviews with a group of very experienced coaches and just kind of helping to get the flavor of what it is that we're trying to get exposed to and trying to understand. Now, we also brought in a partner, a set of consultants to help us. We used an organization called HUMRO, Human Resources Research Organization, and one of those consultants was actually a credentialed coach. And so that was very fortunate for us to have them on board. We followed these interviews up with 2 SME workshops. And the first workshop, we had the coaches write critical incidents. So basically they sat down for 2 days together and wrote over 280 critical incidents. Now, what a critical incident was in our case is we wanted to understand what was the context, what was the background in which the coaching session took place. You know, there would be some history, of course. What was the client saying? What was the coach thinking? What did the coach do that caused the shift in the client? And then what was the outcome? And each of these was rated a 1 through 5 so that we could look at the effectiveness of these different types of critical incidents and the techniques that were used in each of those. So this was a rich set of data. We were able to look at the kernels of each of these and ask ourselves, you know, what happened in those? And we found that really fundamentally there were 3 things. And the first was that the client had some level of likelihood to change, or what we call in our profession, coachability. The coach listened, and then the coach did something that evoked awareness. And this is really at the heart of where this evokes awareness competency came out. So from these critical incidents, we were able to develop some tasks, some knowledge statements, abilities, and some other characteristics. Now, you may notice that skills is not in this list. And the reason for that is how do you define the difference between a skill and an ability? Because an ability is a trait that you may have. A skill is something that you learn. And so some people, for example, communication, some people are born to be good communicators. Some people have to learn that, and it's a skill. So basically, we just said abilities. Now, as I mentioned, the participants came from a wide geographic diverse region, and you can see those here. And there's really no need to go into those further. So as we continue on, we see that we developed a survey from those tasks and knowledge statements and other abilities. We got responses from almost 1,300 coaches out across the globe. And what we found, what we determined were the importance of each of those. And then from the importance, so we had a list, basically, we could understand, okay, what was core? What were the core tasks and knowledge, ability, and other characteristics? We followed this up with another workshop, again, 2 days, brought very experienced coaches into a room, and we analyzed this data. We gave them a lot of the data, we reviewed it, and then we asked for recommendations on revisions to the core competencies. And we got a lot of extremely valuable data input from these coaches. And again, they were from across the globe, and helped us to determine what might what should go into the updated core competencies. So what we found was that the core competencies that were in place were all still valid. That was all still good material. And so we retained virtually all of that information. Now, we were able to make a new set. We went from 11 competencies down to 8. So we were able to streamline those competencies, and we were able to make them a little more consistent, and we were able to broaden, to expand some of the concepts that were in the original set. So if you think of like powerful questions, for example, in the original set, that was expanded into evoking awareness. So we saw this in the critical incidents, that there were ways that coaches used to evoke awareness or insight with a client. There were ways that were more than just the powerful questions. We enhanced the cohesion of the model, and surprisingly, it was more succinct. So we went from about 1,500 words down to 1,100 words. Now, if we look at the themes that came out in here, paramount, number one that came across to us was that the coach must be ethical in all of their work. Also, confidentiality was extremely important. So how a coach handles the client information, what comes out in the session, that has to be prescribed very clearly with the client and with the organization. We also found that there wasn't like one agreement, that there were actually 3 agreements. There was an agreement with the organization, there was an agreement with the client, and thirdly, there was agreement basically in every session. What would you like to work on today? So we tried to delineate these 3 a little more clearly and to bring that out, and we found that that was very, very helpful. We found that the idea of partnership was extremely important, and so we brought that concept out more clearly in the updated model. We also brought out this idea of professional development more clearly and reflective practice. So we have the second competency, the coaching mindset. And from those kernels of the critical incidents, we were able to develop another model that is what we call the reflective practice model. And we published a paper on that in the Philosophy of Coaching journal. And that model is about reflection, so that the coach could reflect upon something that's going on in the moment, or they could reflect on a coaching session afterwards. They can look at the awareness of what was happening with them, what was happening with the client, and then to complete that cycle, there could be some element of self-regulation. So the coach may go back and think about, reflect what happened in a session. They may come to some awareness of their part in that conversation, and then they may choose to self-regulate a little bit differently in future conversations. And that can happen in the session as well. And so this is part of that coaching mindset competency, and that was born about because of these critical incidents that came from the workshops. Finally, there's this idea of the integration of the client context and their culture, and how extremely important that is, that the client and the coach are both working within an organizational context, a organizational culture. There's also the landscape of their family structure and of the values of their geographic culture, and maybe the culture that they were brought up with. We also looked at quite a bit of the holistic view of the client and the coach. So there's this idea about what are the elements that happen in coaching, and some people view that as what's called reductionism. But then, and so that's true. So we look at the 8 competencies, and then we look at the sub-competencies under each of them, and those are the elements, those are the pieces. But then there's the whole coaching part and the holistic view, and so we looked at that as well, and that came out as well. So that's all I have for right now. Happy to answer any questions later. And Carrie, back to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Joel. I think it's really important to understand how much research went into the updates to the core competencies. So thank you for taking us through that tour. Now we want to take a little bit of a tour of the updated core competencies themselves and look at them in terms of how they compare to the original model. And this will also demonstrate how so many of the core elements of the original model, although languaged a little bit differently, are still very much present in the updated framework. So let's start with the first competency, meeting ethical guidelines and professional standards, and that's the how it's presented in the original model. And I've lost my little button to advance here. Hold on just one second. Let me move this window out of the way. Okay, perfect. And how it appears in the updated core competencies is it's still the very first competency. It demonstrates ethical practice, understands and consistently applies coaching ethics and standards of coaching. So very similar in the way that it's presented here. You will find underneath that the new competency that Joel just referenced a few minutes ago, which is embodies a coaching mindset. These were some new elements that came through in the research and is a really great emphasis for why it's important to conduct a job analysis every 5 to 7 years, because like any profession, that is the standard for any certification body, is to provide to conduct a job analysis every 5 to 7 years. And just like all other professions, coaching is very much a dynamic profession, right? It changes, it's fluid. There are new elements that come into play, new practices that come into play. And so it's really important to continue to study the profession and to hear from subject matter experts, those practitioners in the field, to best understand on a regular and routine basis what is important to their practice, what is integral to effective coaching. And so these are some of the themes that came through in this latest job analysis that weren't necessarily explicitly included in the original framework. And so we included this new competency here, embodies a coaching mindset. Now, one of the things that I will mention, and one of the reasons that we are listing this here with demonstrates ethical practice, is that there is a similarity between these two competencies in that you may not hear in any given coaching session, the coach demonstrates ethical practice, the coach embodies a coaching mindset fully. Rather, these are really core to the coach's practice writ large, right? Across all of their coaching. These are elements that really have to serve as the foundation of the coach and the coach's being. And so we kind of call these two competencies the being of the coach. And we'll talk about the subsequent competencies as really the practice or the doing of coaching. Okay, so that takes us to the original core competency 2, which was establishing the coaching agreement. And now that's reflected as competency 3, establish and maintains agreements. One of the things that you might have already picked up on as we're going through these, and you'll see that this is a consistent theme in the updated core competencies, is that we include a verb as the start to each competency. So establishes and maintains agreements, demonstrates ethical practice, embodies a coaching mindset. That was really intentional. It brings more kind of action forward in the coaching. So if we move along to the original core competency 3, which is establish trust and intimacy with the client. In the updated model or the updated framework, that cultivates trust and safety. So you'll notice here a little bit of a shift in the language. The competency itself, the concept is very much the same. It's about developing that rapport, that trust, creating a safe environment with the client so that they can share freely. But the way that we language it is different, and it's very intentional. We heard very clearly that some words don't translate well, not just across languages, but even across within the English speaking world. There are some nuances to language that we need to be cognizant to. And so that's one of the very intentional changes that we made with the updates, is to shift from creating trust and intimacy with the client to cultivates trust and safety. Because at the core, this is what this concept, this competency is all about. Moving along, in the original core competencies, competency 4 was coaching presence. And in the updated framework, it's maintains presence. So very similar in terms of the concept. It's language just slightly differently, but essentially the same competency, the same concept here. In the original core competency framework, competency 5 is active listening. And in the updated framework, it's competency 6, listens actively. So very similar here as well. So this next slide is where things kind of shift a little bit differently. This is where there are some more substantial changes in the organization of the competencies. In the original core competency model or framework, competency 6 was powerful questioning, as Joel kind of referenced earlier. Competency 7 was direct communication, and competency 8 was creating awareness. In the updated framework, powerful questioning and creating awareness were kind of combined in evokes awareness. What we heard from subject matter experts was that powerful questions are really important to coaching. They continue to be extremely important in coaching practice, but it's not the only way that a coach, or it's not the only approach or technique that a coach might use to evoke awareness in their client. It's also supported through the use of metaphors, can be supported through the use of silence. So many different techniques that a coach can use and integrate in their practice to evoke awareness in the client. So we kind of embodied all of those within this one competency, evokes awareness. Now you might be asking yourself, where did direct communication go? And what we heard from subject matter experts is that communication, effective communication skills, is so important across all of the competencies. You can't effectively practice active listening or listens actively without effective communication skills. You can't create the three-tiered clear agreement that Joel outlined earlier without effective communication. So direct communication and effective communication skills was really integrated into all of the competencies across the entire framework. So it lives everywhere. And then finally, if we look at the last 3 competencies of the original core competencies framework: designing actions, planning and goal setting, and managing progress and accountability, you'll notice that they're all integrated into competency 8, facilitates client growth, which includes all 3 of those really core skills and competencies. Taking the awareness that the coach has helped evoke in the client and putting that into practice with the client to transform that awareness into action. So we're going to hold for now some questions. We're going to open up some questions and answers at the very end of our presentation, but we wanted to talk a little bit more about how these updated core competencies are really being integrated into the entire credentialing process. And again, just as Joel mentioned, the job analysis is part of certification best practice. It's part of what certification bodies like the ICF do if they are putting together a high quality certification program. We also follow really high standards in terms of the integration of the competencies into our credentialing program. And it's a process that we've adopted in partnership with our partners at the Human Resources Research Organization, or HUMRO, to integrate these competencies into credentialing throughout the entire credentialing program, including the certification exam. This includes a standardized and rigorous process for the development of a certification exam that includes the input and review of subject matter experts, experienced coach practitioners at each step. So just as subject matter experts were integral to the job analysis portion of our research, they have also been integral to the development of an updated credentialing assessment. And so this provides a little bit of a flow chart, an overview of what that process looks like. Of course, much more streamlined here on one slide. This work has actually been underway since December 2019, so it's very intense and a lot of work to build an updated credentialing exam, but it's something that we're very proud of in terms of the work that we've done and the quality standards that we followed as part of that process. So in December of 2019, just 3 weeks actually after we published the updated core competencies, we pulled together another panel of subject matter experts, and this group met in the Washington, D.C. area, and they took a look at the updated core competencies and created what we call a credential assessment blueprint, which is essentially the outline and the proportion of content that any credentialing exam needs to cover each competency area. And what they found, this was very similar to the process that we undertook when developing the coach knowledge assessment several years ago, is that each of the competencies really should be reflected equally. There's no competency that is more important than the others. And so there's essentially equal representation of the competencies in the updated certification exam that we're building. Fast forward just a few months, and in October of 2020, we published the updated PCC markers, which is essentially how the core competencies are manifest at the PCC level of coaching. And so that's been up on our website for over a year now. And we've also just recently updated the PCC marker assessor training, which supports assessors in using the PCC markers to assess PCC level coaching. All throughout this process, we have been working with HUMRO and dozens of subject matter experts in the development and review and validation of credentialing assessment items. And what an item is essentially a question on the exam. So from all of the critical incidents that Joel referenced earlier in this presentation, our team, in partnership with HUMRO and these subject matter experts, have actually drafted very lifelike, realistic coaching situations that embed a question for the certification exam. So Each of the exam items or exam questions really reflect actual coaching scenarios or situations. We've developed over 200 draft questions for the certification exam. And then we've had panels of subject matter experts review those items to make sure that they are high quality, that they're asking valid questions, that those questions are actually measuring the type of skill or knowledge or competency application that we want them to test. And so a number of those items have been tossed over the months because they didn't meet the quality standards. And at the end of this process, we developed what we call a test form, which is a draft exam. Now we're in the phase of equivalence testing. So this draft exam is actually out in a pilot form. We've had about 250 to 300 individuals volunteer to complete this draft exam, which is underway right now. And the data that we receive back from this pilot exam will help us do a number of things. It will help validate the exam items through one more process, which may suggest, refinements to certain exam items, or it may suggest to us that certain exam items aren't performing to standard and they won't be included in the final exam. The other thing that this pilot test will allow us to do is take a look at those who are completing both the existing coach knowledge assessment as well as this beta exam, what level of coaching or credentialing those individuals are coming from and representing, and it will help us in setting scoring standards for the updated exam at equivalent standards to the current coach knowledge assessment. So that's one important thing that we want to do, is to ensure that that there is equivalence across our new and updated, or I'm sorry, our original and updated exams. Now, we're looking to launch this updated exam in 2022, and we're looking at the second quarter of the year, most likely the April timeframe, once we're able to collect all of the data from this equivalence testing, review it, make refinements to the exam items, and then publish the final exam. So here's a little bit of information about this exam that's coming in 2022. And we know there are lots of questions about this, so I'm going to keep these comments fairly short, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. This exam is developed to measure the understanding of knowledge and competence for coach practitioners. They are based on the updated core competencies, and like I said, are really founded in that research going back to the job analysis that we conducted from 2017 through 2019. The content covers the ICF definition of coaching, the code of ethics, and of course, the updated core competencies. Now, right now, the beta exam that's out there is about 200 questions long. We'll be narrowing that test down to about 150 to 175 questions. It will be scenario based. So like I said, each question will present a realistic coaching situation and ask the coach, the candidate, how they would respond to that scenario with multiple options for responses. We do anticipate that the final exam will take about 3 hours, just like our coach knowledge exam today. So it should be very similar in length. As we move to this new exam delivery, we've also taken a lot of time to think through how best to deliver this exam and how best to ensure the value of the examination process for candidates, as well as the value of the ICF credentials for those who earn it. In doing so, and to meet global standards for certification practice, we are going to be delivering this exam through our partners at Pearson VUE Testing Vendor Services. And those, the exam will be delivered through their test centers, which are located all around the world, as well as through OnView, which is their live remote proctoring testing service. This will allow candidates to take the exam from the convenience of their home or their office, but still with some security measures to ensure that to ensure the security of the exam itself. So just a little bit more information here. As I mentioned earlier, we are planning to launch this exam in Q2 of 2022, most likely in the April timeframe. As soon as we finish this beta exam, we'll be able to set those firm dates, and we'll certainly communicate that very clearly and broadly across our community. Individuals who are applying for an ICF credential before the launch of the new exam will still take the current coach knowledge exam assessment, the CKA. Individuals who apply for an ICF credential after the launch of the updated exam will take the updated exam. And one thing, once we launch the new exam, candidates for any credential level will be required to take the new exam, even if they've already taken the CKA for a prior certification. And the reason for this is that this updated exam truly reflects all of the updated core competencies, which the CKA does not. So we want to ensure that any candidate for an ICF credential has a full understanding and an ability to apply the updated core competencies in their practice. As we've heard, these are really important for coaching practice today. If you do have to retake the exam, you can certainly do that just as you can retake the CKA, and there is a retake fee for that. Individuals who are renewing their existing credential will not have to take the updated credentialing exam. We've had a lot of questions around that. And as the current process exists, we will continue to provide invitations to take the updated exam once an individual candidate's application materials have been reviewed. So you won't take the exam until the very end of the credentialing process. Okay, so now is the time for questions and answers, and I'm gonna, I guess, turn it back over to Franda or Anita for those questions that are coming in.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Anita will take over now.
Perfect.
Okay, we have a couple of questions. I'm not sure if it was quite answered in your session, but one person has asked, Mala has asked, if I have prepared for the assessment according to the new updated competencies, have I done the right thing? Because I believe because obviously, as you said, the assessment is not going to be launched until Q2 of next year. So they're still being assessed based on the old competencies.
That's correct. Great question, Anita, and the participant who, thank you very much. It's a great question. So as Joel mentioned earlier, all of the concepts that are in the original core competencies are also in the updated core competencies. The primary difference between the original and the updated models or frameworks is that we have included a new competency area in the updated framework, embodies a coaching mindset. And there's some, changes to how they're languaged and organized, but otherwise all of the concepts are still there. So if you have prepared for the credentialing exam with the updated core competencies and you complete the credentialing application process prior to the new exam being released, you will be well prepared for the CKA because all of those concepts and competencies are still embedded in the updated model. So you'll be well prepared. Great question.
Okay, thank you. Another question we had come up is from Yuva. Have the markers for the MCC credential been announced as yet? I noted you said the PCC ones, but they're looking for the MCC ones.
That's a great and a very timely question. So I'll invite Joel to join me here in this response. Yes, we have published the updated PCC markers, which are now available on our website. Joel and his team and the ICF academic research team and the ICF credentials and standards team, along with a research partner, have been working to develop the performance evaluation criteria. We often call them the minimum skills requirements for ACC and MCC levels as well. We have a draft form of those, which are about to go in pilot testing actually next week. So it's a very timely question. Once those are pilot tested by our existing assessor team, we will publish those. We want to make sure we don't need to make any changes or refinements to those minimum skills for ACC and MCC before we publish those. So those are coming very soon, and we're excited about sharing those ACC and MCC minimum skills as well. Joel, do you want to add anything to that?
I don't think so. I mean, we've gone through a similar process with the ACC and the MCC at those levels, and we have gone to had extremely long and thorough discussions about what is it at the MCC level, that what are the behaviors that coaches exhibit at that level, and then what are the behaviors for the ACC level, and then we calibrate those with the PCC markers in the middle. So it's been a very intentional process, very lengthy and thorough process as well. So we're pretty happy with the outcome so far, and we hope that you will be too.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. It's one thing that it's really important to emphasize is we go to great lengths to test and to validate what we develop, to make sure that it's actually reflective of practice. So that's really important. Makes for a longer process, but a higher quality outcome in the end.
We have another question from Fariel. Are credential applications and recordings, which are submitted before the 31st of December 21, being assessed according to the updated markers, or is that coordinated with the launch of the new CKA?
Excellent question. Yes. So the answer to that question is any candidate who applies for the PCC prior to December 31 will be assessed using the original PCC markers. We are coordinating the launch of the updated ICF credentialing exam, which will replace the coach knowledge assessment, as well as the performance evaluation criteria for all 3 levels of credentialing simultaneously. So that will happen in Q2 of 2022. Before that date, we will be using the original core competencies and CKA, as well as the original PCC markers for the performance evaluation process.
Thank you. We have another question from Fatima. Now I'm ACC, so when I want to submit for the PCC upgrade, I should retake the test. So the question is, if you're going for an upgrade of your credential, you need to retake the test?
If you apply to upgrade your ACC to the PCC level before the release of the updated credentialing exam, you will not have to retake the CKA. If you apply to upgrade your ACC to the PCC level after the release of the updated credentialing exam, you will need to take the updated credentialing exam at that time.
Okay, we have another question, because we noted that it's now going to be a proctored test and you have to go to test centers. Delaney is asking, if there are no test centers in my country, is it possible to take the test from home?
Yes, so we are very excited to be able to provide the updated credentialing exam through the OnView system, which is our testing partner, Pearson VUE's live remote proctoring service. So individuals will be able to take the exam from the comforts of their home or their office, whatever is most comfortable to them. They will have to show that they don't have materials and books and whatnot around them. So it will be secure. There will be a remote proctor, but you can take the test from home. One of the reasons we selected Pearson VUE as our testing partner a couple of years ago is because of their, they have one of the largest global reaches of any test provider vending service. So they have testing centers in I think over 5,000 testing centers around the world. So they have wide reach of their testing centers, but they also provide this remote testing, proctored testing service as well, which we're really proud to be able to provide for this updated exam.
A couple of other questions. How does a coach prepare for the new exam if they are renewing their credentials? So rather than say like a newly certified coach that has been supported through the updates from a training school, if the person is just preparing for the exam on their own to renew their credentials, is there a practice versions or online preparation? And they're asking, are there any book recommendations that you can support that can support independent exam prep?
Great. Wow, a lot of great questions all in one there. So I'm going to kind of break it down just a little bit. One of the questions I think I heard first, and please correct me, Anita, if I'm hearing this incorrectly or misinterpreting the question. But one of the things that's really important for me to clarify is that it is not required to take the credentialing exam as part of the renewal process. So if an individual is renewing their existing credential, it is required that they complete 40 hours of continuing coach education courses or units. So that's essentially 40 hours of continuing education. And at least 24 of those need to be in core competency area. 16 can be in what we call resource development. Resource development can include, how to build your coaching practice, or it can include things that are not necessarily related to the ICF core competencies. So that's one really important clarification. Now, what I love hearing in that question is that the provider of that question is really interested in upskilling their knowledge and understanding of the updated core competencies as part of their ongoing professional development and growth and learning. That's wonderful. So there are a number of courses that individuals can take that won't necessarily prepare them for the updated credentialing exam, but that can provide instruction and education and practice opportunities in the updated core competencies. ICF provides a service called the ICF Education Search Service, or the ESS. It used to be known as the Training Program Search Service, the TPSS. It just switched over last week, so I'm still getting used to that new acronym. It's available on our website. It includes all kinds of ICF approved courses, including continuing coach education courses that someone can reach out to and participate in to upskill to the updated core competencies. So that's there.
Right, just before you quickly move on, what did you say that was called again?
It's called the ICF Education Search Service. So if you go to the ICF website, and I'll pull the link here in just a second. I'll pull the link and share it in the chat. If you go to the ICF website under the Credentials and Standards section of the website, it is included in the header. So you can say search for education. And that takes you to the Education Search Service. You can search ACTP programs, ACSTH programs, and CCE programs for learning and growth opportunities. So I'll grab that link in just a second. Once we finalize the exam, once the beta version of this credentialing exam or the pilot version is complete, we will be publishing some sample questions on our website that can help individuals in preparing for the credentialing exam. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. We are waiting to collect all of the data from the pilot test first to make sure that what we publish in terms of sample questions are reflective of the final exam.
Fantastic. Fuad is saying and then asking, he says, I realize that the change of the competencies is a bit related to the new change in human behavior after the pandemic. Is that on purpose or it's not related? And if it is on purpose, based on what you change them?
It's an excellent question. I wish I could say that the changes that have been integrated into the updated core competencies were intentional as we predicted what would happen with the pandemic, but they were actually published prior to the pandemic. I totally agree, however, that much of what is included is relevant and timely as a result of the pandemic as well. But these were all published, the research was conducted, and the updated core competencies were published prior to the pandemic itself.
I think I'll add a little bit to that. And we frequently get questions about the different coaching communication methods, or, I don't know that the term modalities is really appropriate, but, whether it's face-to-face, in-person coaching, or whether it's audio on the phone, or whether it's video on Zoom. And what we have found out is that it really doesn't matter. And so with the pandemic and more people going to Zoom or video, that has really kind of been transparent. And what was kind of interesting to me was how some coaches actually say that they preferred audio only, because they don't want those video clues kind of distracting them, and they would rather hear it from the client's voice. So it's really kind of interesting that there weren't a lot of changes because of the pandemic, and so that was really encouraging.
Fariel has asked, what can we do if we want to volunteer to take the new CKA just for learning purposes, not for a credential?
Great question. So there is still opportunity, and we are still looking for a few more volunteers to participate in this pilot test of the updated credentialing exam. So if you have an interest, I'll go ahead and chat my name and email address in the chat. You can reach out to me, and we will gladly send you an invitation to participate in this pilot test. I will mention the pilot test of the updated credentialing exam is available in test centers only. So we're not able to do the live remote proctoring service for the pilot test. You will need to go into a Pearson VUE testing center and schedule that exam. In a Pearson VUE testing center, we'll provide all of the instructions for you to do that, and we would gladly welcome your participation. So thank you very much.
We don't seem to have any more questions in the chat at the moment. If anybody has anything that they're still not clear on, now is your chance to ask the experts.
And while we're waiting for the expert, just a reminder that this session will actually provide you with CCE units. So for those that are looking for educational units for their credentialing, so don't forget to write us in case you would like a certificate of attendance and CCEUs.
I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat box. If we want, okay. So Maisa is just asking who is the right person to get in touch with for the CCEUs.
Well, you can write, I think you registered, you received emails from communications, so you can write at communications. I'll put it in the chat box.
And while you're doing that, Lena, I will just add as well, I am one of those people that were fortunate enough to be able to take the practice proctored test early on. And if you do really want to know what it will be like later to sit for that exam, I do implore you to go ahead and send that email because I found it first to be very interesting. And also, I also found it that once I took it, I really felt that it brought something to me to say, you know what, this is the type of test we should have. This is the type of test that really shows that we are professionals. So if you do get the opportunity to take it, I absolutely would suggest that you do so. And also, Carrie, I've also taken the PCC assessor training as well. And that was challenging. But I do suggest if you get the opportunity to take any of these things and to just, join your ICF local chapter, whether it's here, which I hope it is here for you. But we do welcome you to do that as well. So I see there's other questions in the chat, or Anita, or no?
Yes, there are, not necessarily related to the core competencies itself. Delaney is asking, how can I apply for pro bono coaching, and would it be considered for coach experience hours?
I'm going to answer that for you, Delaney. We'll talk about that in class next week.
That's great. May I jump in here very quickly, just quickly, and say, Franda, thank you so much for volunteering to take our pilot exam. And one thing I should have mentioned in the invitation for additional volunteers, it provides an opportunity to also earn 6 CCE units as well. So we really appreciate those who are volunteering to take the exam. It is important that you have to have either be going through the credentialing process or hold an ICF credential before you're able to volunteer for this opportunity. But we do value that volunteerism. It's so important for us to be able to gather the data that we need to make sure that the exam is valid and fair for all candidates. And so we acknowledge how much it means to us through the delivery of CCE units for those who participate, take their time and participate in this exam. So thank you.
Yeah. So Carrie, but you just said that we need to take, for volunteering, it's going to be even through this testing center, Pearson's. So that we have testing centers in the UAE for Pearson's.
Yes, there are testing centers in the UAE. We did a study of Pearson VUE testing centers prior to embarking, prior to contracting with them, partnering with them. And I think there were only 1 or 2 countries in the world where they did not have testing centers where we had credential holders, but they had testing centers in the next country over. And like I said, once we launch the new exam for all candidates, we will also supplement the testing centers through the live remote proctoring service. So if you don't have a testing center close by to your home where you live, you can select to take the test from your home or office. And even if you do have a testing center right next door to you, you'll still be able to select to take the test from your home or office if that's more convenient to you.
Thank you.
Chantal has asked that she would be very interested in volunteering for the assessment, and where can we see the testing centers in our countries?
That's a great question. I can send, there is a link on the Pearson VUE site where it shows where all of their testing centers are. You will also be able to see when you're invited to take the pilot exam. You'll also be able to see where all of the testing centers are as you're scheduling your exam. So you can see that as well. If you can give me just a moment, I can pull that link to where the testing centers are located, and I'll add that to the chat as well.
The questions related to chapter events, etc., I have answered in the chat itself, so as not to derail the competency side of things. Are there any further questions that anybody has with regards to the core competency changes or regards to the knowledge assessment and the rollout of it? And Carrie has very kindly put the Pearson VUE link into the chat as well, if anybody is looking for their local test centers. think we're coming up to 10 minutes from the end of our session anyway. So if anybody has any last minute questions, I will, if I don't see any, can turn it back over to our glorious hosts to close it out.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And what a great session we've had. I am so happy that all of you joined us, and those of you that are sending the messages in the chat about sending them to, private messages right now about getting those CCEUs. I'm really going to ask you to please go ahead and send those to that email address that Lena gave you earlier at communications at coachfederation.ae. That will help us to have a good record of it, because we may, lose this in the chat. And I really appreciate the fact that you're here. We look forward to seeing you all, even at the ICF UAE Insight Series that will be coming up next month. Anita, right? Yes, that will be coming up next month. We look forward to seeing you there. And for those of you that are interested in becoming members of ICF UAE chapter, we welcome you, we honor you, and we look forward to hearing from you.